They tell me you read aloud without weeping, the Duke of Cranmore said. 3 women before you wept. 1 prayed over me. Sit down, Miss Bray, and read the page my steward has left open, and if you pity me, I shall hear it in your voice before the second line. Alaric heard the chair accept her weight without a sound of protest, which meant she was slight. He heard a gown that had been turned and rehemmed more than once. He heard her breathing settle rather than quicken, and that was the first surprising thing about Thomasin Bray. "It is a pamphlet on the drainage of wet meadows," she said. "It is." "Then your grace will forgive me if I read it badly. It deserves no better." The fire snapped. Alaric kept his face turned toward the warmth of it, as he always did, his eyes closed, because he had learned 5 years ago what happened in a room when he opened them, and could not aim them properly at anyone. "Read it well," he said, "and I shall hire you. Read it badly, and I shall hire you and dock your wages." She read it well. She read it flatly, without the terrible tenderness the others had used, the tone people take with the dying, and when she reached the 4th page she stopped. "There is an error," she said. "On the 2nd page it says 900 rods of tile. Here it says 9,000. Someone has copied a naught." Alaric's hand closed on the arm of his chair. He had had that pamphlet read to him twice by his steward, and his steward had read 9,000 both times, and the bill for 9,000 had been paid. "Read the 2nd page again," he said quietly, slowly. She did. He listened to the numbers the way other men look at a face. "You are engaged," he said. £40 a year, your own room, and coal in it. You will read to me 2 hours in the morning and 2 before dinner, and you will read the accounts on Fridays, and you will never once tell me what a shame it is." "I had not thought it a shame," said Thomasin Bray. "You have a great house and a warm fire and 9,000 rods of tile you did not buy. It seems to me you are doing rather better than most." He very nearly smiled, and did not because he was out of practice. She learned the house as he had learned it, by counting. 11 paces from the library door to the window seat. 22 down the long gallery, where the floor changed from oak to marble and told him so through the soles of his boots. He did not use a stick indoors. He did not permit anyone to take his elbow without asking, and no one at Cranmore had asked in a long while. What she learned that others never troubled to learn was that he was not in the dark. There was light. There had always been light, a paleness where a window stood, a warm smear where a candle burned, the great difference between a shuttered room and an open one. Shapes came to him as weather comes, a sense of mass moving in cream and gray. Faces, never. Faces had gone first and gone entirely. "So when you turn your head to the window," she said one morning, "you are not pretending." "I am not pretending. I can tell you the sun is on the east lawn, and that someone has left the shutter half closed. I cannot tell you the color of your hair, Miss Bray, and I shall not ask, because then you will describe it to me, and people describe themselves very badly." "Brown," she said, "ink on 2 fingers, a nose my aunt calls a misfortune." "Your aunt," said Alaric, "is a liar. A woman with a misfortunate nose does not walk into a duke's library and correct his arithmetic." He rode still. That was the thing the county could not forgive him. 3 mornings a week he took the gray mare down the drove road he had known since boyhood, at a trot, with his groom Hesketh a length behind calling gate and turning. And Thomasin, when she came out to see it, did not gasp and did not shriek. She said, "Your seat is better than my cousin's, and he can see," and Alaric laughed aloud for the first time since the fever. He asked her once, in the yew avenue, why she had not flinched. "Because you would have heard it," she said, "and because my father bound books for 40 years and went half blind at 50, and still could tell calf from Morocco by the smell. He did not want a nurse. He wanted his tools where he had put them. And people moved them. People always move them, she said, and then tell you they are helping. Alaric stood in the cool green tunnel of the yews and turned that over. Above them, a blackbird ran through its whole ridiculous phrase twice. "Miss Bray," he said, "when I open my eyes do you flinch?" There was a pause he could not read. "No," she said. "Others do. I was told once by a woman who meant to marry me that it was unsettling, that I should keep them closed as it was kinder to the company." He said it lightly. "So I keep them closed. It is a small courtesy and it costs me nothing." "It costs you your face," said Thomasin Bray. He did not answer that, but he thought of it for a great many days afterward. His cousin came at Michaelmas. Selwyn Prance arrived with 2 carriages and a great deal of sympathy, and the sympathy arrived first, at the top of his voice, in the hall. "Alaric, my poor fellow, no, no, don't stir Hesketh, does he manage the stairs? Alaric, we must talk about the Kelso farms, you cannot be expected to hold it all in your head." "I hold it all in my head," Alaric said, "because I cannot write it down. Sit, Selwyn, Miss Bray will read us the rents." "Miss Ah," a pause, then a laugh with a hook in it. "Your reader, how very modern. Do you not find it awkward, cousin, a young woman in the room while your affairs are aired?" "My affairs are tiles and turnips," said Alaric. "Read, Miss Bray." She read the rent roll for Kelso and Ray and the mill. Alaric listened. He had heard those figures in March and again in June, and he carried them the way a musician carries a tune, and the tune was wrong. Not wildly. £1 here, 3 there. A tenancy at Ray that had been let at 12 and was now entered at 9, with the difference gone somewhere polite. He said nothing at all. He asked Prance about the shooting. That night he had Thomasin bring the ledger to the library, and he shut the door and he said, "Read me the Ray entry for last Lady Day. Then the one for this. Do not tell me which is which. I want to hear whether your voice knows." "My voice will know," she said. "I am a poor liar." "Then read them both twice, and let it know." She read. He sat with his eyes closed and his fingers laced, and listened to a man's dishonesty come up out of the page like a draught under a door. "9," he said at last. "It was 12 when my father let it, and my father would have gone to law before he took 9. And in the column of repairs, there is a sum for a roof on a barn that burned in the year 8 and was never rebuilt, because I stood in the ashes of it and I could still see then, and there was nothing left to roof." Thomasin was quiet. Then, "There is a hand at the bottom of the page, an initial, S.P." "Yes," said Alaric, "there would be." He heard her set the ledger down, and heard her not ask the question, and answered it anyway. "He means to petition," he said. "Incapacity, a commission of inquiry, a kind cousin appointed to manage the poor blind Duke's estate. He has been building the case for a year, and the case is that I cannot know what is in my own books." He turned his face toward the window and the last gray warmth of the day. "So I shall know them better than he does. Every figure, every date, every farm. Read to me, Miss Bray. Read to me until I have the whole of it." "That will take weeks." "Then we have weeks," said the Duke of Cranmore, "and you have coal in your room." They worked through October by firelight and daylight alike, which for him were only a difference in the warmth on his cheek. She read. He repeated. She read again. He learned the rents of 41 holdings, the dates of 11 leases, the tally of a burnt barn and a lowered rent, and a bridge repaired 3 times in 1 year by 3 different masons who were all, it transpired, Selwyn Prance's wife's brother. "You are frightening," Thomasin said once, near midnight, hoarse. "Drink the tea, and be less impertinent." Your Grace, I have read you 900 numbers today, and you have given me back 900 numbers. I have nothing else to put in the room, said Alaric, and heard the words come out more truthfully than he had intended, and heard her go still. The commission sat in the great hall at Cranmore on the last Thursday of the month, because Prance had been clever enough to want it held there, where the county could see the Duke fumble in his own house. 14 gentlemen, 2 lawyers, Lady Aurelia Fenn, who had once advised him that his eyes were unsettling, in a green gown that rustled like money. "It is no accusation," Prance said warmly. "It is a kindness. My cousin's affliction is no fault of his. But a man who cannot read his own accounts cannot be said to know them, and the Kelso tenants have suffered for it." "Then let us try it," said Alaric. He stood at the head of his own hall with his hands loose at his sides. He asked for the ledger to be opened at random and read aloud, any page, any year, and he named the entry before it was finished. He gave them Ray at 12 and Ray at 9. He gave them the barn that burned in the year 8, and the name of the tenant who had watched it burn beside him, who was in the room, and who stood up and said so. He gave them the bridge, and the 3 masons, and the maiden name of Mrs. Prance. The hall was so silent, he could hear the candle flames breathing. "A trick," said Prance, in a voice gone thin. "He has been coached. That girl has fed him every word. Good God, gentlemen, look where his fortune is going. Look at his reader, a bookbinder's daughter in a duke's library at all hours, and you ask me who is managing Cranmore." Alaric heard the sound the room made then. It was not outrage. It was interest. It was 14 gentlemen and 1 green gown leaning forward, and the small hard breath of Thomasin Bray by the window, and he understood, with a clarity that sickened him, exactly what his cousin had just done. Prance had lost the estate and had settled instead for her name. "Miss Bray is dismissed," said Alaric. He said it flatly, into the middle of the room, before he could think of anything better, and the room relaxed the way a crowd relaxes when the danger has passed by somebody else. Prance's case died in an hour. Lady Aurelia told him he had acted with great propriety. He heard a chair scrape, and a gown that had been turned too often crossed the marble and the oak, 22 paces, and the door, and he did not lift his hand. She was gone before morning. She left his place marked in the book they had been reading, a ribbon laid straight, and she left the ledger stacked by year, and she left nothing else, because she had brought nothing else. Cranmore, it turned out, was not silent. Alaric had never known how much of the house had been her, the scratch of a pen at the far table, the small bad-tempered noise she made at a dull paragraph, a cup set down 2 inches from his hand where he could find it without groping. Hesketh read to him, and read like a man reading a sentence of law. The house counted out its paces, 11 and 22, and every one of them arrived exactly where it should, and none of them arrived anywhere he wanted to be. On the 9th day he stood in the yew avenue in the rain and said aloud, to nobody, "It costs you your face." Then he sent for the carriage. The bindery was in a lane off the market in Ashcott, and it smelled of glue and leather and cold paper, and Alaric found the counter with his knuckles and heard a stool go over. "Your Grace." "Miss Bray." He had rehearsed a great deal of it in the carriage, and none of it came. "There is an error in my accounts." "There is not," she said. "I balanced them." "There is." His voice was not steady. "In the column of what is owed. I have entered you at £40 a year, and the true figure is everything I have, and I have been carrying the false sum about in my head for 3 weeks, and it will not come right." He heard her come round the counter. He heard her stop close enough that he could feel the warmth of her, and smell glue and ink, and he stood very straight because he did not know what she meant to do. "You sent me away in front of 14 men," she said, "to spare you their tongues. It was the worst thing I have ever done, and I did it in half a second, and I have had 3 weeks to know it. He could not take my land, so he took your name, and I let him, and I called it protection." He drew breath. "You were the only person in 5 years who did not move my tools, and I put you out of the room." The rain went on against the little window. Then her hand came up and touched his face, her fingertips at his cheekbone, careful as a woman handling a page too old to turn quickly, and then her whole palm along his jaw. "You needn't close them," said Thomasin Bray. "Not for me, not ever for me." Alaric of Cranmore opened his eyes. He saw what he always saw. The pale bloom of a window somewhere to his left, a warm smudge where a lamp stood, and in front of him a shape of shadow and shoulder that was hers and would never be more than that. It was not a miracle. He had stopped asking for miracles in the 2nd year. But it was her hand on his face, and his eyes were open, and nobody flinched. "Stay," he said. "Thomasin, stay. Not as my reader. I will find a dozen readers, and they will all be dreadful. Stay as the mistress of Cranmore, and count the paces with me, and tell me when a book is not worth the candle." "You cannot see my face," she said, and her voice broke on it, "and you are asking me that." "I have known your face since the 4th page of a pamphlet on wet meadows," said Alaric. "It is the face of a woman who will not let a naught be added to anything." They were married in the church at Ashcot in December, with a bookbinder in the front pew and the tenant from Kelso ringing one of the bells badly, and Alaric walked the aisle without counting, because her hand was on his sleeve, and that was all the map a man required. Selwyn Prance was not invited and did not come, and was in due course invited to explain the bridge to a magistrate, which he did poorly. That winter Cranmore was full of noise again. She read to him after dinner and argued with him about the reading. He taught her the drove road on the gray mare stablemate and refused, absolutely, to hold her rein. She put his tools where he had put them, and told the servants, in a voice of great sweetness, that anyone who tidied the library would answer to her. And on the first clear night of the new year they stood at the top of the east lawn, and she said, "There is a moon, a thin one, over the yews." "Yes," said Alaric, "there is a paleness there, and now I know its name." He turned his face down toward her, eyes open, quite unhurried. "Describe it to me badly, my love. I have all my life to hear it."